The power of I'm sorry. When we find ourselves in conflict because we're insisting that our partner do something our way, or because we're reacting to the way our partner happens to be doing something, there's a simple out: apologize. Notice the negative effect that what you're saying or doing is having on the relationship. Stop doing it and apologize. It's never too late to say I'm sorry. These are tremendously healing words. They can stop a conflict instantly and drop both people into their hearts, because I'm sorry comes from essence. I'm sorry concedes that you were wrong in pushing for what you were pushing for. It stops the ego, which is trying to be right, in its tracks, and immediately allows the partner to relax and feel sympathy and love for you. When we're able to acknowledge that the ego is running us, it loses its power over us. It's only when we act it out unconsciously that it has power. But as soon as essence comes in enough for us to be conscious of what's happening, the ego's game can't continue. The jig is up, the ego's been seen, and it can no longer run us. This turning point requires a willingness to admit you were wrong, and that's the hardest part. But once you see that what's been driving you to hurt or manipulate your partner is the ego trying to be right, then it becomes much easier to let go, be humbled, and say, I'm sorry. You don't have to defend the ego's position because you see that the ego isn't who you are anyway. It's just that part in all of us that causes suffering to ourselves and others. It's surprising how just saying I'm sorry softens you and your partner. Suddenly, there's nothing more to argue over because you've conceded the fight. There's no more reason to withhold your love, which we often do to try to manipulate our partner, and the result is that love begins to flow again. Suddenly, you both remember what you love about each other. It's funny how the ego clouds this, but it does so only momentarily if we're willing to concede our position and apologize for any hurt we may have caused. Your partner will love you for that, and more important perhaps, apologizing makes it possible for you to love your partner again. The importance of forgiveness. When we forgive our partner for being ego-identified and for everything that comes with that, such as anger, unkindness, manipulation, judgment, or blame, that allows us to stay in essence, which is its own reward, and why forgiveness is actually not so hard to do. It feels good to forgive because goodness and essence feel good. Isn't it interesting how life rewards us for goodness, while following the ego feels really bad? Life has a built-in self-correcting mechanism. Without forgiveness, we jump into ego identification and try to prove our partner wrong and ourselves right. Forgiveness, on the other hand, allows us to accept that our partner is in ego identification and to love him or her anyway, and this is what allows our partner to drop into essence and out of ego. Forgiveness allows us to stay in essence, and it brings our partner into essence. Forgiving ourselves is just as important, for the same reason. To forgive yourself for being ego-identified and all that comes with it requires seeing that you're ego-identified, and this breaks the spell of ego-identification. As soon as you see that you're ego-identified, you're outside of it, and you have some choice to either re-identify with the ego or not. At this point, you can decide to stop trying to defend your position. Instead, you see that your position was, in fact, the ego's position and not yours at all. You forgive yourself for being human, and that forgiveness allows you to experience essence. However, as long as you're identified with your ego's position, you won't see that there's anything to forgive. To forgive yourself, you first have to see that your position isn't necessarily the best or only position, and the ego doesn't want to concede this. If your partner is in essence and not in the ego, this will be easier for you to see. What you can notice when you're identified with the ego is how bad this makes you feel, not to mention how bad it makes your partner feel. And you can acknowledge that feeling bad isn't what you want. You want to feel good. You want to feel love. So you forgive yourself for being human, because you don't want to suffer anymore. You see that you can have your position and suffer, or you can feel good and be loving. All it takes to free yourself from suffering is to forgive yourself for being human, for having an ego. It isn't your fault anyway. Forgiveness also allows us to let go of the past, which is the source of a lot of trouble in relationships. We forgive the past because the only alternative is to bring the suffering of the past into this precious moment, and doing that simply doesn't make any sense. It makes sense to the ego because it would rather have its position and suffer than be wrong. But the ego is the irrational part of us. Essence's wisdom and point of view are available in any moment if we allow ourselves to drop out of our mind and into the moment where essence can be accessed. Essence is accessed through our intuition, not through our mind. When we drop into our body and senses and out of our mind, we experience life and our partner as essence does. From essence, forgiveness is easy, because essence feels only love, compassion, and acceptance. It sees the truth in your partner, and it sees the falseness of your own ego. From essence, it's possible to let go of past and current positions and all the pain they entail. These positions don't do you any good anyway. You don't need any of them to be who you really are. You don't need your ego. What a relief and what freedom to discover that suffering is unnecessary and just a matter of choosing to put your attention on something other than your ideas of what you want, what you like, what you think, what you wish, and what was. And forget it. We all do stupid, careless, or hurtful things that we later regret. If relationships are to last, we have to find a way to not only forgive these indiscretions, but also forget them. Forgiveness alone isn't quite enough if we bring these memories of these wrongs into the present moment, which is sure to revitalize them and the feelings around them. We need to leave them in the past where they belong. Fortunately, there's only one way the past hurts can be brought into the present, and that is through thought, which is something we have some control over. Although we may not have control over a thought arising, we do have the power to either feed it by giving it our attention or turn away from it. Even though turning away isn't always easy, it's infinitely easier than the alternative, which only produces suffering for everyone. One of the reasons the memory of a transgression isn't ignored is because the one who was wronged often wants to punish the other by bringing up the transgression, rejecting the other, or being hurtful in return. That's the ego's way of dealing with having been hurt. But inflicting pain on others is no solution to having been hurt. Doing this only creates more pain, not only for others, but also for us. It feels terrible to be hateful and unkind. Those who hurt us deserve our compassion, not revenge, because they must be suffering a lot to have done so. It feels bad to be identified with the ego and its hatred, anger, and negativity. Why join those who are being hurtful by adding more hurt to the situation? When we are the one who caused the harm or hurt, we sometimes dwell on the memory of it as a way of punishing ourselves or to try to atone for what we did. But this too is an ineffective strategy on the part of the ego and only keeps us identified with the ego and the pain. Guilt is one way the ego keeps us identified with it. Forgiving ourselves and not bringing the memory of the incident into the present is the only thing that can free us from the ego and the pain it causes. Forgetting the incident doesn't mean you won't learn from it. You undoubtedly will. It just means you won't continue to suffer over it. Suffering doesn't serve anyone or anything. It's unnecessary and a sign that we are identified with the ego. When you see the truth of this, ignoring such memories becomes easier. They don't serve you, your partner, or your relationship. Bringing these memories into the present moment only serves the ego, which is always trying to be right, even long after an event has passed. That's really what these memories are about. Bringing them into the present is the ego's highly ineffective way of trying to fix, defend, or exact retribution for something that happened in the past. And none of these things is possible. Bringing thoughts about the past into the present fortifies the pain of an event and makes it more likely that that memory will come up more regularly. It causes you to re-experience the pain, and it reinforces the tendency to dwell on such thoughts and keep the pain going. The mind will chew on such things like a dog on a bone, refusing to let go. But unlike a bone, these memories can never be fully chewed and digested by thinking about them. That merely ensures the perpetuation of pain. The only way the pain from the past can be stopped is through a conscious act of will to not dwell on painful memories when they arise. Dwelling on them only creates a painful present. We are free to choose, of course, and many do choose to dwell on those memories for a very long time. But it's exhausting, and it destroys relationships. Do you want love more than this pain and drama? The ego actually doesn't, but essence does. When you are able to find that place within you that is willing to forgive and forget, then love is possible. Something more than forgiving and forgetting is required when relationships are abusive, however. By all means, forgive those who have abused you, and forgive yourself for having allowed it, and forget it. But also leave the situation. In these cases, you forgive the abuser and yourself, and forget the abuse for your own well-being, so that you won't be burdened by anger, blame, hatred, shame, self-blame, guilt, sadness, regret, and resentment. Forgiving, forgetting, and leaving are the gifts you give to yourself because you don't deserve abuse or the painful feelings that come from it.